Reserve component survivor benefit comes with added costs and lots more complexity. Hey, I am Chuck the bureaucrat, and today we are going to combine two not entirely transparent ideas. That's reserve retirement and the survivor benefit program into one giant monster reserve component survivor benefit program. And let me just say, this program is a beast. I mean, nobody should have to face this kind of red tape alone. Now, as we go through this, we're really going to hit three major points. The first one is the terminology that they use, and that really has to do with some important milestones. Next, we'll talk about different options that reservists have that aren't really an issue for regular Army folks, and then we'll close out by talking about costs. To get started, we're going to need a good reference for this, and the best one I have found is the Department of Defense's Financial Management Regulation, the FMR. You want to go to the official DoD FMR website. Now, I'll put the link in the description, and you want to click on chapters. Do not Google this. Search engines kept giving me like old archived versions of the FMR, and while they look official, they're not accurate. All right, now what you want to do is you want to select Volume 7B, Chapter 54. That's current as of June of 2022. Oh, and by the way, I am assuming a certain level of familiarity with the regular Army Survivor Benefit Program. Today, I'm just going to focus on the uniquely reserve component considerations, and if you want more information about the basic program, check out this video. Okay, let's go back to our old buddy from the gray area retiree video. He joined the Army National Guard at 18 years old, served 20 years of qualifying service, so he qualified for a pension at 38. He stopped drilling and was a so-called gray area retiree for 22 years before he finally qualified for and started receiving his reserve pension at age 60. The FMR defines some specific points within this timeline that are really going to drive how the reserve component survivor benefit program is applied. First, you have the date when the service member becomes eligible for retired pay. This occurs upon completion of 20 years of qualifying satisfactory service. Often, the service member receives notification that they've reached this milestone through a written document often called the 20-year letter. Then, you have the date when the service member becomes entitled to retired pay. That means that not only have they done the requisite amount of service, but they have also reached the appropriate age to begin receiving a pension. That is usually at age 60 unless they have some service that qualifies them for an earlier retirement. Now, the FMR often uses the term retirement date to mean the first day in which the service member is entitled to start receiving their retirement pay, or the first day that the service member would have received their pension had they been alive. And then there are two final timeline-related terms. The first one is the so-called 90-day period, and it's not to scale here. This is the period in which a reserve component service member has to make their survivor benefit election. And these 90 days start when the service member receives notification that they have performed the requisite amount of service to qualify for a pension. Personally, this 90-day period worries me. I mean, they define it as beginning when you receive notification, and presumably that's your 20-year letter, but they don't say it explicitly. But I wouldn't wait around. Unless you are satisfied with the default option, and I'll explain that in a second, you do not want to be sitting on your hands waiting for your 20-year letter to take action. Now, there is something important lurking here that I think is important to point out. Reserve component service members have to make their survivor benefit program election when they reach 20 years of qualifying service. That means whether you're a gray area retiree or you're going to continue to drill, or even if you're mobilized on active duty, you have to take administrative action to make a decision about this program when you hit the 20-year mark. The final timeline term that I want to hit is date of receipt of election for reserve component survivor benefit program. This is the date when the records manager receives the form that the service member uses to make their election, or the date of the postmark on the envelope. So do you see? Timing, people. It's all about timing. This is a tight window, and there's something about the way that all of these terms are defined that makes me think that reserve component soldiers often trip over these timelines. All right, so I told you all of that so that this next part should make more sense. When a reserve component service member enters that 90-day period, they can make an election for survivor benefit program, either option A, B, or C. Under option A, the service member defers a survivor annuity election or declines coverage until retirement age. That means that there is no coverage between the time that they become eligible for a reserve pension and entitled to receive their pension. And then at retirement age, the service member can elect to participate in the survivor benefit program, just like anybody becoming eligible for retired pay. If the service member elects to continue to have no coverage and then dies, well, obviously there's no annuity. If they elect coverage, then when they die, there is an annuity. But the important thing is that if a service member elects option A and then dies before they reach the age of being entitled to a retirement, there is never any annuity. And then if a service member elects option A, they have to get spousal consent. Under option B, the service member elects to defer the survivor's annuity. Here, the beneficiary receives an annuity starting on the day that the service member dies or on the day that the service member would have been eligible to receive their pension, whichever is later. Option B also requires spousal approval. And then there's option C. Here, the service member elects to provide their beneficiary an annuity that starts on the day of the service member's death, whether it occurs before they start drawing their retirement or after. Now, here is the important thing. Enrollment in option C is automatic if you take no action. In a way, that's good because it makes sure that people who aren't paying attention are still getting coverage. But in a second, when we talk about the costs associated with this program, you're going to see why some reserve component soldiers might be scrambling to elect anything other than option C. Okay, when it comes to the costs and benefits of the survivor benefit program, remember that everything is calculated off of a base amount. For regular Army folks, that base amount is any dollar figure between $300 a month and their full monthly pension. For reserve retirees, well, there is an added layer of complexity because isn't that always the way? The reason for this added complexity is that reserve component soldiers have to make their survivor benefit program election years before they actually start receiving their pension. That means that nobody knows what their full monthly pension is going to be when they finally start drawing it. There's probably going to be pay raises, they might accumulate more points, they might get promoted, they might do more years of service. So the guidance on the reserve component survivor benefit program goes through a whole bunch of mental gymnastics just to say this. You are going to select a percentage of your full final monthly pension to serve as your base amount. You want 100% coverage? That's easy. If your pension would be less than that $300 at the time when you make your election, they just mark you down for 100%. If you elect a base amount that's higher than your full final monthly pension, they cap you at 100%. And by the way, the fact that they make this point about capping the base amount suggests to me that more times than they'd like, this process gets sloppy and confused. If you elect a dollar value between $300 and your full monthly pension, they calculate a percentage, and they use that percentage against your final pension in order to determine your base amount. Okay, that was the appetizer, because the kicker shows up when we start talking about the costs. A reserve component survivor benefit premium consists of three things: the standard premium, the reserve component premium, and the survivor's annuity premium deduction. Standard premium is just the 6.5% of the base amount that regular Army folks pay. Now granted, it has a couple of its own caveats about things like people who joined the Army before 1990, but for most folks, it's just 6.5%. To understand this reserve component premium, consider this. DFAS pays for your survivor benefit coverage out of your retired pay. That means you can only start paying for survivor benefit after you have started to receive your pension. But if you elect option B or C, or you're automatically enrolled in option C, you receive coverage before you can start to pay for it. Now, DoD does not pay for that first piece of coverage. Instead, they collect an add-on cost, the reserve component premium, after retirement pay begins. The rates are set by the Department of Defense Office of the Actuary, and these rates are based off of the age of the service member, the age of the beneficiary, and the option selected. Again, I'll put the website link in the description so you can go look this up on your own. Now, I wasn't able to find the most current rates, but I was able to find the 2022 rates, and that gives us a good look at how these are done. If we take, for example, a 42-year-old service member who is covering a 42-year-old spouse, the cost for option B is 1.71% of the base amount, and the cost for option C is 2.46%. All right, so that is the reserve component premium. Third and final part is the survivor's annuity premium deduction. This one is a little weird to me. It is a reduction in the beneficiary's annuity to pay for coverage that was received while the service member was waiting to start their retired pay. That's not the weird part to me. I mean, some service members are going to die before they ever reach an age where they collect a pension, and that means they'll never actually pay for the coverage they received. What's weird to me is that this deduction is fixed at 0.01% of the base amount for all beneficiaries. That is the smallest amount that they charge without being zero, and they apply it to everybody. It's as if they retain this cost just in case they ever have to run it up in the future. All right, well, so what? Well, I think there are two important things here, and they both have to do with choice. Number one, I am suspicious that the vast majority of reserve component retirees end up enrolled in option C just because they don't know about how tight that 90-day period is. In fact, I'm suspicious that at one point I was enrolled in option C without knowing it. That's because I qualified for a reserve retirement about 3 years before I qualified for a regular retirement. The fact that you get auto-enrolled in option C means that reserve component soldiers can be incurring a bill that they don't know about. In fact, do their spouses know they have coverage? I don't know. And here's the second thing. I have my doubts about the survivor benefit program's cost effectiveness. I mean, I'm enrolled. My wife likes the kind of coverage that she has. But if you figure that reserve component pensions are smaller and the reserve component premium takes a bigger bite out of that. It seems like you can end up with no pension at all. Instead, people are going to want to at least look at the options associated with term life insurance. And if you're interested in how your VA disability claim impacts it, check out this video. In fact, you might want to think about term life insurance paired with either option A or option B. Let me know what you think.